And what was one of the more memorable expeditions that you've been on?
When I actually found a new dinosaur.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it was really cool.
Okay, I have so many questions about this. Hi, and welcome to Explore a Story. I'm Emily Grassley, coming to you from the Field Museum in Chicago. So, I'm not really sure where I got this idea from, but when I was a kid, I sort of had this assumption about the world that everything had already been discovered. Like, we already knew all of the birds and the mammals and the dinosaurs and stuff, and that new species were no longer being found, at least on a regular basis. But as I became more involved in natural history museums, I quickly realized that actually the opposite is true. New species are being discovered faster than they can be described. And this idea that there are likely more things we don't know about the world than we do know is going to definitely be a recurring theme on our program. So today we're going to hear from two paleontologists about discoveries that they've made. Gabi Rossetto is a collections assistant at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and even though she's a relatively young geologist, she's already helped make a significant contribution to her field. Let's go to her first. So, Gabi, what do you do here at the Denver Museum?
I am the paleobotany collections assistant here. So I run a group of about 30 volunteers that helps me to accomplish all the aspects of fossil plant preparation, curation, and storage of our fossil leaf collection, which consists of 84,374 specimens and counting.
So when you say paleobotany, what does that entail? Like, what makes a paleobotany collection?
So a paleobotany collection is basically all of our fossil leaves, fossil wood, and fossil pollen that we have in the museum.
So like fossil plants.
Yeah.
And how old are some of these things?
So these things range throughout geologic time. We've got stuff from the Ice Age, from snowmass right here in the Rocky Mountains, and we've got stuff all the way back to Precambrian, some of the earliest types of fossils, plants.
So most of your work is now in paleobotany and in the geologic collections here, but do you ever get the chance to do field work?
Yeah, so that's one of the main job perks of being a collections assistant here at the museum is I get to go out on digs where we are constantly excavating and building up our collections.
And what was one of the more memorable expeditions that you've been on?
When I actually found a new dinosaur. So I was actually in the Curator formation, which is about 72 to 77 million years old.
And where is this formation found?
So this is in Utah in the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. And I was out there for 6 weeks straight camping and working with the museum. And it was a lot of hard work, but it was also really fun and rewarding, especially when I found the site. So we actually run multiple camps throughout the area because it's so huge and there's so much land to cover. So ironically, it was like the day before we were about to move to a new area, and I had been out prospecting all day with another volunteer. And we had been looking for stuff all day, and basically what you're doing is you are scanning the ground for any pieces of bone and then trying to trace where they're coming out from the actual hill.
It's like following a trail of breadcrumbs a little bit.
Yeah, kind of. Basically, we had been up in one area where we had a bunch of small teeth and a huge variety of different fossils that have come together in a kind of like a mudstone. And so I was looking out and I saw a similar layer across the valley. And, since I'm a geologist, I figured if this layer here in this bed has a lot of fossils in it, there's a good probability that there's going to be more fossils if we go check out that spot. It just looked really cool.
Yeah. You were drawn to it.
Yeah, I just had a feeling. So we climbed up on top of this ridge and started walking down several hundred meters. And when we got to the edge, to the very tip of the nose of this big Badlands exposure, we both started walking around different sides of the hill, and we just both started saying, oh, there's bone here, there's bone here. And we just kept finding tons of bones all around this one level on the hill.
And did you know immediately what you had found?
No, so that was really a good sign that we actually had bone everywhere. It was coming out of the hill, and we were pretty sure that we had a dinosaur.
So what did you do after that? Did you like run back to camp and you're like, hey, everybody, I got a jackpot? Or like what happened next?
Yeah, so there's really always that moment of like, did I really make a good find, or is this just something that ends up coming back to camp and then they just look at it and say it's crap and throw it away in the fire? Because it's like, oftentimes it's like volunteers go over this learning curve of like when something's worth collecting and when it's just an isolated element. And so we ended up going back the next day and kind of digging at the surface to see like, where are these bones leading to? What's actually under that top layer that was covering them? And so I was digging on a bone, and I found this super round ball. And at first, I thought that it was a ironstone concretion, because you can often get these weird spheres that will form in the soil where you're getting concentrations of iron. And so I thought, oh, this is just something in my way. I've got to, chisel this out. And I was like about to throw it down the hill, because I thought it would be fun to just kind of get it out of the way. And then all of a sudden I realized that that thing was attached to the bone that I was digging out. And that was kind of the real moment of realization, like, I found a thing, like, this is a real animal. And what that piece was actually the occipital condyle, which is like the round ball joint that actually connects the skull to the vertebrae in the neck. And then we started to realize, we don't only have that one cranial element from the skull, we also have other elements of the body here. And that was the real moment, realizing that it was going to be something awesome.
So what kind of dinosaur is it? Do you know?
So it is a ceratopsian, so it's one of the horned dinosaurs, and it actually appears to be a new species.
So you didn't just discover like some random dinosaur bones. You discovered a brand new species of dinosaur not known to science.
Yeah, it doesn't look like any of the other described ceratopsians that we have, so it's really interesting to be contributing to that kind of discovery.
But that's like huge. I mean, for somebody who, is relatively new to this field, like, is this a common thing for people right out of college to go out and discover a brand new species of dinosaur?
I wouldn't say it's common, but there's definitely luck involved, I think, with the fact that it's a new thing. But as you can hear from my story, like, it definitely used geology to kind of guide me there and find where this dinosaur was.
All right, so I really liked what Gabi was saying there at the end, that even though there's definitely luck involved, it's still really important to have confidence in relying on your own knowledge and the expertise in your field. But how is the experience different if you are the expert? To answer that, we've got Dr. Ken Angielczyk back in our studio. You might remember him from a previous episode. He's an associate curator in paleontology here at the Field Museum, and he primarily studies Dicynodonts, which were these barrel-chested, tusked mammal relatives. They started showing up in the mid to late Permian period, around 290 to 251 million years ago, and they're really diverse, cool-looking creatures. But even though they were some of the most abundant land vertebrates in their time, there's still so much we don't know about them. Anyway, here's Ken. At what point do you realize that you have a species that may be new to science?
My experience when I found or recognized new Dicynodont species, the first thing is usually that I can't identify it. And so, like, I've spent a significant portion of my life like looking at Dicynodont specimens and studying them and things. And one of the few things in life that I'm actually good at, which is like a completely like worthless skill in some ways, but like I'm actually pretty good at identifying Dicynodonts. And so when I don't recognize what one is, it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting. Like, what is this? Why can't I identify what it is?
You could like try to ask the world expert, but then at what point are you like, oh wait, I'm the world expert on this?
Yeah, it's sort of that situation.
Oh, wait, if nobody else knows.
There's not many of us that work on Dicynodonts, so it's not that
there
hard
like
to be the
giant...
world expert on them.
Yeah, the Dicynodont convention. How many people would show up to the Dicynodont convention?
Probably between 5 and 10. Be a very intimate gathering.
So not a convention.
No, dinner party maybe.
Yeah, the Dicynodont dinner party.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely what you need to call it. That's amazing. I love that about some of these fields where it's like there are just so few people who are working in them. And you think, well, like, oh, there are a few people doing something. I think like 100. 100 is not that many people out of the 7+ billion on the planet. But out of Dicynodont experts, you could all gather around the table we're sitting at right now.
Yeah, pretty easily. If like an asteroid hit the museum or something at that moment, like Dicynodont research would be set back by decades. But
oh, no! That'd be a horrible thought. Oh, you can never all be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's too dangerous.
You must only have like 4 people in the room. The world can't lose that knowledge.
No.
That's going to keep me awake at night. Jeez, that's always the argument too when people talk about like really robust collections. Like, should we put all of the best collections in one museum? And I'm like, have you seen Independence Day? Like, horrible idea.
So anyway, the way I sort of like the first like aha moment is when I can't identify something. And so usually there's sort of like a time delay between sort of saying, oh, I don't know what this is, and kind of moving forward. So if it's something that you find in the field, getting it prepared and to the state where you can actually do some comparisons with other species. Once the specimen is ready for doing those comparisons, then you actually have to go through and do the comparison. So compare it to other specimens, compare it to what's been described in the literature to try to determine whether it is something that has been named. In the case of Dicynodonts, that can sometimes be a fairly painstaking process because lots and lots and lots of Dicynodont species have been named over the years. Most of them aren't actually valid species. They're basically the same species getting named multiple times based on poorly preserved specimens. But in that sort of mass of names, there are sometimes the thing that you think is new actually is something that was kind of named almost by accident. And so going through and making sure that you haven't kind of overlooked something like that is important. Finally, by the end of, if you've gone through and done your comparisons and it really seems to be something new, then it's like, all right, I think we've actually found something that is a distinct species here.
Even working in this field for as long as you have, does finding or just discovering that you have a new species, is that still exciting, or does it kind of like wear off? Like, now I got more paperwork to do.
No, it's still exciting. It's something that's very interesting to be able to, like, whenever you find a fossil in the field, you're kind of the first person to have seen it since it was buried. So
wow.
There's like an initial excitement where it's like, wow, I found this fossil, and the last animals that saw it lived 250 million years ago. That's a pretty profound thing when you like stop and think about it. Kind of within the context of the science, to be able to say, all right, this is something that I've been able to recognize as a new species, maybe because no one has discovered it before, or if it's something where it's been discovered but hasn't been recognized as a distinct thing, that I've been able to put together the information to do that. That's an accomplishment that I feel proud of and excited about. And so when kind of doing the work and naming a new species, I think it's something that taxonomists really take seriously, because it is something that has like a really kind of lasting impact, and people 200 years from now will be potentially dealing with the like fallout of species that I named today. The same way, like Robert Broom, who was a famous paleontologist who worked in South Africa for much of the early part of the 20th century, he named hundreds of Dicynodont species and other ancient mammal relatives. And my colleagues and I that work on ancient mammal relatives, including Dicynodonts, still are very much dealing with the aftermath of Broom, like practically naming every specimen that he found.
Wow. You're having to untangle a lot of things, given like new technology and new ways of looking at specimens and processes and all of that.
In his defense, the technology that he had for preparing the specimens was very rudimentary, and so he had
like a chisel.
Yeah, basically like hammer and chisel. And so the material that he had to work on in many cases was pretty poor by kind of modern standards.
I love that long lens of science, right, where you're picking up you can trace back your, what do they call it, your academic lineage, like who trained you and who are you then training for the future, and it all is like a long line of accountability and discovery.
A good example of that, so the very first Dicynodont specimen that was ever named Dicynodon lacerticeps was named in 1845 by Sir Richard Owen, who was a British paleontologist, who, like, one of his claims to fame is he is the person who made the word dinosaur.
Wow, that guy.
And yeah, so that guy. Interestingly, one of like Darwin's like staunch opponents. Anyway, so Owen, in the process of naming Dicynodon lacerticeps and other Dicynodonts that were sent to him from South Africa, the holotypes of those species are still preserved in the Natural History Museum in London.
And you can like look at their original notes and like see his handwriting and imagine the point in time where he's like, I am going to name these things dinosaurs, and like you can actually recreate that moment. That's really cool.
So it's kind of the sort of history of the field in a sense. It's always kind of like there as part of what you're doing.
So talking also about like time machines, I think about all the time about where I would go and when if I had a time machine. I think it would be like the best tool for paleontologists. I think a lot of people would utilize it. So if there was any place or point in time that you would want to visit, what would it be?
I would, without question, go to like the late Permian period of Earth history in the Karoo Basin and go hang out with the Dicynodonts.
Yeah. Do you think? I mean, think about everything that you could learn that you don't know about them already. Like you could watch their feeding and their mating behavior and like whatever else they might do. Yeah,
just to give you a really like basic thing. So I don't know what color any Dicynodonts are.
What?
Because we don't really have any sort of like integumentary fossils of them, so what their skin or anything was like. So I don't know if they were green or brown or black or white or what.
It reminds me of the XKCD comic where the people are like visited from the future and it says, we just invented time travel and we came back to this point in time because we want to see spiders. And one of the characters tells the time traveler, well, there's one in a web over there. And the time traveler says, they have webs? And then, like, it just, like, it goes running off the frame. But it's like that kind of thing where you're like, imagine, because webs aren't going to, what if Dicynodonts lived in webs? That's
probably not, but yeah.
Come on. I don't know. There's no way of knowing. That we'll have to leave that up for the time travelers of the future. I bet your mind would be totally blown if you could go back.
Yeah, I think so. And it's, again, I've been working on the group for a fair amount of time now, and it's like, it would be interesting to see if they're anything like what I imagine them being like.
Yeah. Jeez. Well, now I want to go there because I didn't even think about you wouldn't know what color they are. Some dinosaurs you can kind of infer and like with feathers and you can make extrapolations. But like, what if Dicynodonts were like, I don't know, rainbow colored? I don't know. Just
my 5-year-old daughter would love it if they were rainbow colored. But yeah.
Hi, my name's William Robertson. I'm a paramedic student at ACU in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia. And it's summertime here. I'm just hanging up the washing, but have a listen to the world around me.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you like this show, please like us and rate us on iTunes. Since we're still pretty new around here, it would really help us out a lot. You can look forward to a new episode every other week in the iTunes store or on our website, explorastory.com. It's all one word. And find us on YouTube at youtube.com/thebrainscoop. Explore a Story is hosted by me, Emily Grassley. We were joined today by Gabi Rossetto, a collections assistant at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and by Field Museum Associate Curator Ken Angielczyk. The show is produced by Brandon Brungard and Sherry Arasan with music by Jason Widener, and were made possible from support by the Field Museum in Chicago, Illinois.